As the world watches with growing frustration, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood before a nearly empty UN General Assembly hall, delivering a speech that echoed familiar talking points but found few eager listeners. The irony was hard to miss. While he spoke of security and survival, delegates silently walked out, signaling the deepening global rift over Israel's actions. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump is talking settlement. He promises an imminent end-of-war deal for Gaza, adding that he will not allow the annexation of the West Bank. As more nations publicly recognize Palestinian statehood and call for an end to the war, a pressing question remains. How much longer can Netanyahu cling to a narrative the world is increasingly rejecting? Welcome to In Depth. Diplomats walked out as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took the stage for his address Friday, vowing Israel would finish the job in Gaza and urging Hamas to surrender. According to Axios, Netanyahu ordered loudspeakers set up around Gaza to broadcast his speech directly. He slammed recent moves by countries like the UK, France and Canada to recognize Palestine, calling a two-state solution insane. His speech comes just days before a meeting with US President Donald Trump, who has said he wants back Israeli annexation of the West Bank. Israeli opposition leaders sharply criticized Netanyahu's address to the 80th UN General Assembly, calling it tired, gimmick-filled, and lacking any real plan. Reported by the Times of Israel, opposition leader Yair Lapid said Netanyahu failed to present a strategy for releasing the remaining detainees in Gaza or ending the war, accusing him of worsening Israel's global standing. Avigdor Lieberman also attacked the speech, calling it a party leader's address, not the speech of a prime minister. Meanwhile, far-right finance minister Bezalel Smotrich hailed Netanyahu's speech as an important declaration. The New York Times reported that on Friday, Trump appeared optimistic about the prospects for peace in Gaza, stating it was looking like we have a deal. However, whether Trump can successfully bring the nearly two-year-old war to an end will likely depend on how hard he is willing to push Netanyahu, who has firmly refused to back off his military campaign and grew more defiant in his UN speech this week after Western nations recognized a Palestinian state. Trump also made a firm statement at the UN, saying he would not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. There has been enough. It's time to stop now, said Trump. For more analysis, we're joined from Washington by Ms. Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and political analyst, and from the occupied Jerusalem by Mrs. Ratiba Nacha, a member of the Palestinian National Action Committee. Welcome to you both, and let me here start by Mrs. Ratiba. Mrs. Ratiba, addressing a nearly empty hall, Netanyahu once again focused on threats to Israel's security since October 7th to justify his military actions in the region. Now, why did he start his story from there and not from the Palestinian civilians who have been suffering and were targeted since very, very long date before, or even since decades?
Actually, this is the Israeli way to show that they are victims and they are forced to use this much of power and to kill those people, not because they want to be a murderer and kill that much of people, but because they are victim and they are suffered and they are afraid and threatened all the way through the history, and they must put a stop for their suffering and their being abused from this very ugly war toward the Jewish and the Israeli people. So they are forced to use this much of power, and everyone must support their means and their aims to protect those innocent Jewish people and Israeli people, even by killing more and more innocent people in Palestine. And he actually ignore totally that the Palestinian people are suffering through decades from this Israeli illegal occupation, and even in the UN, they recognize the occupation, that it's illegal action, and they give Israel a period of 1 year ended this month to end the occupation and all of these action of action against the Palestinian right and against the Palestinian, and give them freedom and a way of having their freedom state. But still, in the point of view of Netanyahu, he is the victim, and he is forced to use this much of killing and weapons to save his people.
Right. Let me go to Miss Ginger. And Miss Ginger, beyond being a sign of protest, what did the mass walkout of diplomats at the UN during Netanyahu's address suggest about the current state of Israel, international isolation or international standing?
Well, first, thank you, Ms. Mona, for having us today, and greetings to your viewers and also to your other guests. And, essentially, the majority of the UN members walking out was a show to Netanyahu that we have heard enough. We've heard the same thing decade after decade, and we've had enough. We've heard enough. Halas. And Netanyahu's speech, as you noted, was extremely defiant. Netanyahu was basically saying to the rest of the world, screw you, we are going to do whatever we want, and justifying it, as your other guest pointed out, by presenting themselves as the victims. Everything they do is just a response, a reaction to everyone else. Nothing is ever their fault. They are the consummate victims. And one of the things that many people don't notice is in the 3 months before October 7th, Israel had killed 200 Palestinians. So just in the 3 months leading up to October 7th, we had 200 Palestinians killed by Israeli forces. So October 7th did not start the war. It was just another chapter in this decades-long, 77-year battle that has been going on for essentially for the theft of land and the displacement of the Palestinian people. And the other thing that was very significant was while Netanyahu was at the UN making this defiant speech, Trump was in Washington, D.C., saying that he felt optimistic. He thought they had a plan in place that he was going to work with. And He also said there would be no more settlements in the West Bank. He said no more. He's going to make sure of it.
We'll get to
What
that
this
point.
says,
We'll
well,
get
what
to
this
that
says
point,
is
Miss
he could
Ginger.
have stopped this all along.
We'll get to that point because this point we need to stress on. We'll get to that point. Let me here take Ms. Ratib. And Yair Lapid specifically faulted Netanyahu for failing to present a plan to secure the release of detainees or a clear way to end the war. Now, how does this criticism reflect the primary domestic pressures currently facing Netanyahu's government from the opposition?
Actually, I don't think that the opposition is really willing to have a Palestinian state or pushing Netanyahu for a peace process or something like that. We will be really false if we think that there's a real opposite in Israel. It's like just a dominate of power in the Israeli community. It's internal issue, but in the external issue, and when it comes to the Palestinian, everyone agree that there's no chance for Palestinian state in the near future or in any future, and they voted on this on the Knesset a few months ago. So I think that the pressure is to rearrange the priority of Netanyahu in this war, and not the aims of this war or stopping a real well to stop this war. So they want to put the detainees as one of the priorities, and to find a way to let them back to their families alive, not as bodies. So
But it's not just the opposition, Mr. Diba. If you're following, of course you're following the inside of Israel. We've seen too many protests waiting for Netanyahu, standing in front of his house, in front of the government. We've seen lots and lots of protests against the Netanyahu's policy. And also, this is not the first time that he is really, that he has been really attacked by figures, opposition figures like Yair Lapid, like Lieberman, and definitely we cannot forget the those criticism by his own former defense ministers.
Actually, yes, we can find this conflict inside the Israeli political community since day one that Netanyahu established this government, and even before the 7th of October. And this is because they have internal conflict about who will be the center of the power, the religion, ideologic. Zionist, or the other in the other way, what we call it the deep state in Israel and the traditional state in Israel. And yes, those opposites sounds that they build in a very long journey the status of Israel among the world and among the Arab world, and they are pushing for more and more benefits from these relations and this way that they build it through these years. And they don't want Netanyahu by his um, I don't know, ideologic or this his way of leading this government to destroy every effort that they do through these 8 decades to build the states of Israel and all of these things. But again, when we come to the Palestinian issue, I think that everyone in Israel is really in the same line, and they are against having any Palestinian state. And when we have these protests for the families of the identities that they go every week through Tel Aviv and Jerusalem roads, they have one demand: just to release their relatives from Gaza. And after that, Netanyahu can do whatever he wants, because the Palestinian life doesn't matter for most of the Israeli, fortunately. And that's because the speech of hate that they raised their community and their children, that we are the others and we are not human even. So they are not feeling guilty to see that much of Palestinian killed, because they didn't feel that they are a human such as other Jewish people, and they are a lower kind of I don't know if they even see them as humans, but creatures, and they keep say that they are creatures. They didn't say
Yes,
that they are humans,
yes,
and
we
making them
definitely,
things,
we
yeah,
definitely heard.
make them out of, yeah, guilty.
We definitely heard some of the of what Smotrich and Ben Gvir have said before or described people in Gaza before. Miss Ginger, let me here ask you, returning back to what you were speaking about and Trump's optimistic declaration of a looming deal to end this war directly contrasts what Netanyahu said in his speech of finishing the job. This is how I'm quoting him against Hamas. Now, what could be realistic, or what could be elements of realism from which Trump could find a deal that suits what he speaks about and at the same time fulfill what Netanyahu has been speaking about?
Well, Ms. Mona, this is one of the issues that has prevented this situation in Palestine from being resolved for so many years. And as we've seen, Netanyahu has stood up defiantly, says he will never allow a Palestinian state. And at the same time, President Trump acts as though he genuinely believes he is working toward a two-state solution. And the result of this is going to be a showdown. And for Netanyahu, he is becoming more desperate. He is seeing that right now he has Congress and he has the White House in his pocket. He is defying the international community because he has nothing left to lose. So he is, as your other guest pointed out, he is dehumanizing the Palestinian population so that he can continue with their genocide and ethnic cleansing and displacement. And the American public, and indeed the entire rest of the world, is going to resist this. And the problem is how. So we do see Trump is now finally
But
working with
yes, but here, Miss Chapman, I'm speaking about what Trump himself has declared. He declared a 21 point to end this war, right? While Netanyahu, at his speech, he spoke of ending the game and ending Hamas, which means that he will not end that war. So from your point of view, how can Trump make this balance between what he declared of ending this war and what Netanyahu said? I mean, here, how can he make this balance to satisfy what he said of promises and satisfy also what Netanyahu wants? What do you think?
Well, one thing we have seen is that Trump has engaged in negotiations as though essentially we've used negotiations as a cover for these surprise attacks, such as on Iran, the assassination attempt in Qatar. And what the American people want to know is, was Trump aware of these himself personally? We know that our CIA did work with Israel on the attacks in Qatar. And essentially, Trump is giving mixed signals. On one hand, he appears to support Netanyahu. On the other hand, when he's aware that there are atrocities, he finally says no more and puts his foot down. So essentially, Trump has no strategy, and America is supposed to be taking the lead. However, we are not. Up until this point, we have let Netanyahu dictate to us and to our intelligence community what the facts are going to be on the ground. And as a result, Trump is finding himself at the end of lawsuits over the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. However, the more immediate facts on the ground is essentially Netanyahu is saying there will be no peace. He is determined to carry out his final solution to the Palestine issue for him, and he plans to go on with his Greater Israel project. And the American people, Trump is realizing the American people are no longer behind We no longer support this. And in fact, public sentiment is turning against Israel so rapidly that now it seems that Trump is trying to do damage control. And with respect to the 21-point plan, there are conditions there that we know Netanyahu will not agree to. For example, the transitional government setting up a Palestinian-led government, and even in the interim, they're essentially the 21-point plan appears to be a reasonable plan to move forward towards peace. And we know Netanyahu will resist this. So this is a wild card.
Indeed, Netanyahu will resist this, and that will get me to another very important question that I will ask you. But let me go here to Ms. Ratiba first. Given Netanyahu's right-wing political pressures, and we are aware of the right-wing political governments of Netanyahu and Donald Trump's pre-meeting vow not to allow the annexation of the West Bank. What are the likely points of friction or potential compromises that will dominate the meeting on Monday?
I think that Netanyahu will remind Trump that he can be his analysis islands in the Middle East, and he will try to put the Abraham agreements as one solution to have like stability in the Middle East, and remind him that he can be his partner in his investment in the Middle East, and no need for any compromise with the Arab world or the Palestinian for these investments and for these agreements, Abraham agreements, and he will try to use the IPAC as much as possible to remind Trump that Israel is over the American as he tried to do with Biden when he invited himself to the Congress in Washington in 2024. And he will do the same, I think, in this visit. And I think that, yes, America now is losing her image as the greatest country in the world, and its image that it can influence or maybe control Netanyahu's will and behavior. And every time they met and every time they have any kind of agreement, Netanyahu shows that he has the last word, and his will will be in reality, and no one can force him to go for any other direction other than what he want and what he planned. I am not having a lot of like hoping or bending this hope on the meeting on Monday, and I think that we will see more show of power that Netanyahu have through IPAC and other power points in America, and show Trump his real figure in front of Netanyahu.
Yes, definitely the influential groups there is very strong. Let me go to Ms. Ginger and what we were speaking about. If, as you said, Netanyahu will not carry out with what Trump has promised, or and he continues on with the annexation of the West Bank, with the war in Gaza, the destruction, the killing, and all this until what he claims to be the ending the game with Hamas. What do you think that will make of Trump? And what will that, how will the image of the United States be after the President of the United States and what he promised with is not fulfilled? How would that reflect Trump's and the United States' strength?
Well, right now, Netanyahu and Trump are looking for a military solution to this political problem, and this will only be solved politically, not through force on the battlefield. And it appears that Trump is finally starting to realize that, and this meeting on Monday is going to be very critical because Netanyahu has had his way for so long and has controlled the American presidency and foreign policy for so long that Netanyahu will dig in his heels. He will rely on all of his propaganda and hasbara to convince Trump to move forward with what Netanyahu wants. However, Trump cannot do this because, as your guest mentioned, not only is the United States losing our reputation and becoming more isolated on the world stage, but financially, we are taking a hit. Our economy is going to suffer with the
But here,
restrictions.
Ms. Chapman, how will that reflect on the image of the United States as one of the biggest powers in the whole world? How will that reflect on the power of the US to be able to implement its will? What do you see of that?
This will weaken the United States. And that's one of the problems. Netanyahu has been over decades weakening the United States. And here he is showing up the limits of American military power and American influence. For example, a great example is the 2 months that we were bombing Ansar Allah in Yemen. And we gave up because we lost too much money, 3 fighter jets, and we lost face. We looked militarily incompetent. And once again, this is what Netanyahu is doing to President Trump and the United States as not just our military limitations, but he is showing up winning American influence on the world stage. We can no longer diplomatically cover for Israel. We can no longer protect Israel from retaliation just by our might and our prestige and influence. So not only is the world turning against Israel for the genocide and ethnic cleansing, they're turning against the United States for our unconditional support. And this is weakening us. We see that our tariffs are losing bite, our economic sanctions. Other countries are openly defying the United States. So by attaching ourselves to Israel and Netanyahu, we are being dragged down with them. And this is weakening us reputationally, military might, our influence, and isolating us on the world stage. And Trump is going to have to realize at one point, the American people will say, are we going to send boots? Are we going to send soldiers into Palestine? Are we going to send boots on the ground into Iran? So the American people are actively resisting Trump. And indeed, this will actually, I've said this for a long time, this will sacrifice his presidency and his domestic agenda on the altar of Netanyahu's ambitions. Right. So this is not going to look good for President Trump if he persists in following Netanyahu's lead, and the American people want him to be the president we elected, stand up for America and the Palestinians and humanity and the rest of the world, and no longer be a Zionist puppet bought and paid for by donor money, right, but stand up for America first, right, and the world.
Yes. Mr. Ziba, I have only 2 minutes left for me here. By labeling the two-state solution insane, how fundamental is, or fundamentally is Netanyahu challenging the established decade-long international framework? We're speaking here, of course, about the United Nations. And what is the likely impact of diplomatic efforts by the UK, France, and other nations, and the backlash of the whole world?
I think that Israel now in that threshold for this conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They are trying to do whatever they can do to jump to the greatest Israel and to throw all the play cards that they have and to show as much power as they could to improve their ideologic dream. And in the other way, I think that the West, especially France, got the idea and know that there's no way to let Israel go for this very big like jump from the to nowhere. It's a jump for nowhere, and they want to make a return back for the two-state solution. So I don't think that what is happening from organizing Palestine and the two-state solution is just for the Palestinian, and because they feel maybe some empathy with the Palestinian people, but it's more to protect Israel from unknown future because of what is Netanyahu doing, and he didn't have a real strategic goals or aims from this war that it seems endless for the West, and it cost
Right.
a lot for everyone. So I think that it's a
Yes.
turn back for keeping the situation as much as possible under
Right.
control.
Right, that was Ms. Ratiba El Natcha, a member of the Palestinian National Action Committee, and Ms. Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and political analyst. We thank you so much for your very valuable insights, and I guess that concludes today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.